TCI is brought to you by Into Mischief, sire of Audible, winner of the Grade 2 Holy Bowl Stakes, and leading contender in Saturday's Grade 1 Florida Derby.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, we have some races that we need to recap from last weekend before we jump into this weekend's races, which include the Florida Derby. I want to talk real quick about the Sunland Derby. I've known you a long time. We've done this show a long time. I don't think the Sunland Derby winner is going to come roaring onto the TCI top 10, but it is worth mentioning because he was pretty impressive. And of course, I'm talking about Runaway Ghost. Joey's a local horse there. He looked pretty impressive in this race, but tell me, what did you think of the performance?
Well, you know, they give away a lot of money there, $800,000, and it's on the dirt, which is great. You get some California horses, but look, I mean, it's a Grade 3 race, and the top contenders this time of year, John, are focused in on those $1 million Grade 1, Grade 2 preps, the iconic preps we're aware of and that we'll talk about today. Sunland Derby just has never really reached that status, so you get a lot of second-tier type horses in here. You see the horse I liked, the Blitz horse. He's faded already on the rail there. A lot of speed in this race, and I think you saw a lot of middle-distance horses that really didn't want to see out this mile and eighth. A horse that really enjoyed it, obviously, and won decisively here is Runaway Ghost, John. A horse that had some California form. Last year's a 2-year-old, but running on this circuit, and interestingly enough, the prep for this, I believe the Mind That Bird Derby it might have been, he was second, beating a couple lengths, decisively, I would say, by Re-Ride. Horse we'll talk about this weekend who shipped over to Dubai for the UAE Derby. So Runaway Ghost is a horse that, certainly he punches his way into the Derby now, but you really have to question, maybe his form altogether and how he would step up against some of the top colts of his generation and whether or not he's up to that challenge like maybe a Mind That Bird was.
Right.
Who obviously lit the tote boards up a good 8 or so years ago.
Well, he definitely won this race easy. Let's talk real quick about the Louisiana Derby. This is an interesting race because we see Noble Indian here. He's a horse who was disappointing in his last race. But Joel, I thought he was done at the top of the stretch, to be honest. I'm watching the race. I said, oh man, Noble Indy's kind of spit the bit.
Yeah.
I got to give it to Johnny V. I mean, the horse definitely showed a lot of heart, but man, Johnny was riding that horse for all he had. Tell me, what did you think of the performance, and did he do enough to get on the TCI top 10?
We know the blinkers, I don't know if they helped him show maybe a little more speed in here. I don't know if they helped his focus any. And again, you're right, I thought he was done at the top of the stretch too, John. The problem was there was nobody who wanted to run by him. I mean, let's be honest here. Tom Amos's colt for the late Tom Benson, I've really liked this horse quite a bit. John followed him from his Saratoga maiden win all the way through his Churchill Downs form at 2. He looks like a one-turn closer to me. That's why I didn't like him in this race. He's putting in a big effort here, but that horse he's not even won around 2 turns at the allowance level. And this is the $1 million Louisiana Derby. So it doesn't surprise me. Lone Sailor did not want to go by Noble Indy here. I think the rail was pretty good. I mean, if you look at the day, the track was playing pretty fast. I mean, go the Crescent City Derby for Louisiana breds a few races before. That was only a mile and a 16th. But the winner, just coming out of Maiden Company, goes 46 and change for the half mile and keeps on going and wins decisively. So the fact that they go 22:46 in here, I think that was a product of the track. I think Noble Indy was on the best part of that racetrack on the inside. Johnny V, a strong rider, and getting a horse that has some quality to finish. The key is, are you now bought into the blinkers and the mile and eighth and the whole classic picture with Noble Indy? In my opinion, I think it was a bit of a weak race, that he was in the best part of the racetrack, and to me, the fact that Lone Sailor hung in here, which he's shown he does around 2 turns, I think that's why Noble Indy was able to outgame him on the inside and win. And then my boy Jack, again, you question, his quality. When he ran against the best in the Sham, he was dusted pretty easily, went third that day.
Right.
He got a gimmicky type racetrack in the Southwest, came up the rail like Hawakam did, I believe it was in the Razorback, the race before. Hawakam had never won a graded stakes, came back and won like a good thing. Same thing with my boy Jack. So now him having to close on the outside here, having clear run down that long stretch, not being able to reel this group in. Again, what do you make of this race going forward? To me, I evaluate it as a race that maybe just wasn't quite a top caliber race. And look, the speed figure was good. If you believe in that 95, let's just talk about the buyer. If you believe the 95 buyer, then you'd say, that's a solid race. That's a gun runner like Louisiana Derby win headed to the Kentucky Derby. I just question whether or not it was truly that good.
All right, let's take a look at the TCI top 10 then, and let's see if there's any change. And looks like there isn't. I'll let you run through the top 10 here and tell me what you're thinking.
It stays unchanged for me, John. And you're right, you see no impact based on this past weekend on. Now, we have some horses that are going to run this weekend in the Florida Derby, namely Catholic Boy in that 10 spot. Anxious to talk about him quite a bit about the Florida Derby. In terms of news, when I look at the top 10, I mean, we can talk about workouts a little bit. Justify laid down his second big work outside of that allowance win. I mean, he came back and immediately laid down, I think, a 46 half mile against a really good workhorse, Dr. Dorr, a week after his easy allowance win, and had a monster gallop out, and then comes back again against not as good of a workhorse, but again, just looks so sharp in the morning, John. I mean, you have to like that he's knocking down every challenge in front of him. I think it's worth noting because he moved up in that top 5 for me. Another horse, Instilled Regard, still looks like the same Instilled Regard for me. He's not a great morning workhorse. Watching him on XBTV, he's a horse that has to be ridden a little bit. He gave his workmate a big head start, tried to reel him in a 7/8 type work. I thought he finished okay in there, John, but I don't think he's a brilliant work type horse. I'm interested to see if he can rebound or not against top class horses in that 1.8 Santa Anita Derby, because I think he'll love the distance. Not so sure he'll love that racetrack. Maybe Santa Anita's not his best track, and not so sure he'll handle that company. So really those two works I think stand out for me as far as happenings within the top 10 this past week.
All right, well, this next weekend, I mean, this is really, we're going to start seeing some major Grade 1 Derby preps. Joel, there are 100 points. Let's talk about the UAE Derby, because this has really become the gateway for international horses to be able to punch their ticket to the Kentucky Derby. It's interesting to kind of see. Now it's on dirt. It's become more of a legitimate Derby prep. We see some, U.S. bred horses that have international connections. And then, of course, we do see some just truly international horses. Yeah. I want to talk about a horse called Mendelssohn. Well documented. He comes from, the same family as Into Mischief and some really good horses. He's by Scat Daddy. Joel, tell me, what do you think about him in the UAE Derby? Do you think it's his to lose, or do you think there's some competition in there?
I think Mendelssohn's really good, and I think he's a progressive sort. I mean, look at his 2-year-old form, and it wasn't good till the end of the year when they stretched him out over a mile on firm ground, and that to me hints a little bit that this horse could definitely handle the dirt. I mean, look, like you said, Into Mischief, 7/8 miler dirt horse, legitimate. Yeah. Beholder, we know, one of the greatest distaffers of all time on the dirt. So again, when you look at Mendelssohn, he's the one that we're really looking at in this race, right? I mean, he's the one that, can he finally be that European horse with a true bona fide dirt pedigree that steps up, proves he can handle that surface, and comes with a real shot? I mean, I remember when they brought Johannesburg, and everybody was real excited about him because he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile the year before, but really he was not a big contender that year. Can Mendelssohn finally be that horse coming over for Coolmore and for Europe to finally make an impact on the Kentucky Derby? This weekend is proving grounds for Mendelssohn. And look, he'll go up against a couple stablemates. John, another son of Scat Daddy in here that they think that maybe can handle the main track. The pace setter in here is a full brother from Hit It a Bomb, the Spendthrift Stallion, a really good Warfront family, colt out of a really nice family there. So there's a lot of pedigree in here. And I mentioned Re-Ride, America's hopeful for Steve Asmussen. I'm very interested in the fact that they brought this horse over for the UAE Derby as opposed to running the Sunland Derby, to where he won the local prep there is $800,000. It punches your ticket in the Kentucky Derby. But the way they've campaigned this horse, I'm a little questioned about how they feel about his quality. I mean, broke his maiden like good thing as a 2-year, went on the shelf, came back and won an off the turf allowance race, I believe, at Keeneland that day. Is a horse that, again, they were trying to get him on the grass. They run him at Delta Downs. He doesn't run with Snapper and Sinclair and all these Asmussen horses on the Oaklawn or Fairgrounds prep circuit. Instead, he runs at Delta against a bunch of Louisiana breds, goes out to Sunland, where Steve usually sends his second-tier horses, wins the prep there. I believe the Mind That Bird Derby, like I mentioned, over Runaway Ghost. That Runaway Ghost on the running line certainly flatters his form. However, the fact that they bring him in to the Dubai UAE Derby makes you question a little bit what they really feel about or what they're motivated with this horse in terms of they really feel like he's a real Derby contender or not. He's the American hopeful. You have a couple Japanese horses. You have a local filly there. The horse that I like, John, is Gold Town. Just the fact that he has dirt form. He's a street cry. It's strictly a turf family, but he is a street cry. Well, obviously was turf bred himself, but proved to be one of the nicer Dubai World Cup winners I've seen probably in the running of that race, and obviously he's been an impactful dirt and turf sire. His 2 races, he's won by almost 15 lengths combined on the dirt, including over a 10-length win in Group 3 company in the prep in his last time out. And the trainer really likes how he's doing. Charlie Appleby's a great conditioner. So I think he has the edge in here. I think it's a 2-horse race between him and Mendelssohn. I'm really anxious to see between those two if we can get a gauge between, how good they are. If both of them are good enough to maybe be Kentucky Derby players, does one separate from the other? and what kind of impact could that have on this year's Kentucky Derby picture?
All right, well, let's take a look now at the Florida Derby. You know, this race is really, it's been a very successful race as far as getting Derby winners. I mean, you look at Orb, you look at Big Brown, you look at last year's Derby winner, Always Dreaming, came out of the Florida Derby. I want to look at the TCI top 10 again real quick, just because it's interesting for me. The favorite in this year's Florida Derby is a horse called Audible. Not even on the TCI top 10.
Yeah.
You know, a horse that's probably going to be, you know, second favorite. You're looking at Catholic Boy. He's all the way down at number 10. Does that just speak to the quality of the Florida Derby this year? And why would a race that's had so much success not have, you know, a lot of home run horses in there? I mean, like, I'm looking down through here, and there's a few that, to be quite honest with you, that I've never heard of yet. There's some maiden winners in there. Tell me a little bit about the Florida Derby and its quality this year.
Well, we talked about it after Bolt d'Oro and McKenzie ran to the wire so impressively in the San Felipe, and how we really felt like California is the standard bearer this year, and that the Florida horses are frankly behind the East Coast horses, John. I mean, you're right. I mean, you look at the Holy Bull winner, a major early season race, and that's Audible is going to come in here as your favorite. You know, he gets a 99 buyer and wins by 5.5, and he's not on my top 10. Same thing, the Fountain of Youth winner, prestigious race, gets a 96 buyer, wins by 2.25, and that horse Promises Fulfilled is not on the top 10. So I think this race in the Florida Derby is proving grounds, and I do think it came up a little better than both the Holy Bull and both the Fountain of Youth did, just from the standpoint that I see a legit horse that's in my top 10 that has entered the Florida Derby field that I think is going to give us a pretty good gauge on, A, how good is Catholic Boy, particularly in a tight dirt track, and I think we got some answers this past weekend. I really liked his work coming into this race. They shipped him down off of Bridlewood, the training farm here. You got a picture of him here training at Bridlewood. They shipped him in for a local work. That's what Jonathan Thomas tried to do when he ran at Tampa. They vanned him over for a couple works coming into that race. Remember, he ran extremely wide in that race. He got beat by Flame Away in the Sam Davis. It was his first race of the year. I don't know if he liked the surface or not, but they elected not to go to the Tampa Bay Derby. So obviously they felt like maybe that wasn't his best surface. He still ran a 6 on the sheets, which was a monster number in his 3-year debut. I love the work at Gulfstream Park. He worked a half mile, and boy, you have to love the finish and the way he got over that track. You know, my question with him all along has been, John, is he a turf horse or is he a real dirt horse? And I think we might have seen some answers. And again, we won't know distinctively until this weekend whether or not he's a true dirt horse or not. But I love what I saw. I think he's going to face quite a bit of speed in here. I'm a little hesitant the fact that he doesn't have speed. He's a big horse. He's a horse that likes to get covered up and produce a late kick. Those are typically not horses that do well at Gulfstream. But the fact this is a 1.8 mile race with some horses that have some speed that, you know, you take a Strike Power in here drawing the rail. I think he's going to go. I think he's a sprinter. I think Strike Power in his heart is a 6 and 7 furlong type horse. I think he's going to go from the rail here. Usually your first time stretching out is your best opportunity for a sprinter like this with some quality. And he showed that he ran pretty well in the Fountain of Youth. He's on his wrong lead. He didn't really kick it in the final 16th, but he ran well enough, and I think the racetrack carried him around. Strike Power now, second time, going a 1.8 mile. He's a horse I really don't care for in here. I think he's going to set the pace from the inside. I think you're going to see, you know, Promises Fulfilled. He's got to go in here. He's an interesting horse. Just because he won the prep last time out, Romans has talked about how well he's trained. Can he validate that win against what I think is going to be a tougher field, being that Catholic Boy is in here? So I'm very interested to see, does Promises Fulfilled, Audible, again, an Into Mischief, a horse that I think is more of a miler type, can he stretch out to a 1.8 mile and validate his Holy Bull win? And how are they going to fare in the stretch against a horse like Catholic Boy? And how is the typical speed bias that at Gulfstream going to potentially aid one horse over another? I mean, we won't know that until after the race. Personally, I think Catholic Boy is going to sit a trip with enough contested pace in front of him. I think his strides are going to prove to be best in the stretch, and I like him quite a bit in here in his true dirt debut, in my opinion, going a 1.8 mile.
You know, it's interesting. We talked with Dale Romans a little bit about Promises Fulfilled, and he said he very much reminds him of Shackelford, a horse that he trained, won the Preakness, ran pretty well in the Florida Derby. I think he ran second in there. He says they have very similar styles. So I'm with you. I can kind of see that, you know, there is some danger in that this track has been known to get a horse that's on the lead and get them to come all the way around. So it will be interesting. You're going to have some real Strike Power, Promises Fulfilled, and probably even Audible. I mean, you're going to have some legitimate horses that are going to be putting down some fractions. So I think it's going to be a good Florida Derby for sure, but it'll be interesting to see if those styles could take them to that next level, and which would be in the Kentucky Derby.
Well, I think I mentioned I'm not a Strike Power fan. I do see him on the lead just because he drew the rail and they're going to have to push out of there. Promises Fulfilled and Audible. Those are the two for me, John. They're most likely to assume the lead on that far turn, which is key. I mean, usually the horse that makes that move and can wrestle the lead away at that point, they're very tough to reel in, those type of horses that are tactical like that. Those are the two I'll be eyeballing the most here. But I just really believe that Catholic Boy is the best of this group, John. That work the other day sort of validated for me that, look, he's in our top 10, and I think he can move up from that 10 spot, and I'm looking forward to him doing that this weekend.
All right, thank you, Joel, and thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back next week. We'll recap the Florida Derby and the UAE Derby and see how they affect the TCI top 10.